Watching the news in English is a great way to improve your English, but they do use some very difficult words in the news. So in today's English lesson, we will take a look at a news clip. I have slowed it down just a little bit. You will see the words on the screen. We will watch a segment and then I will come back and teach the difficult terms they use. We'll look at some English phrasal verbs, some English idioms, and some advanced vocabulary you might see on the IELTS or TOEFL exam. This news clip is about Kamala Harris giving a speech admitting that she lost the presidential race. Let's take a look at the clip and then I will come back and teach some English.
The country is preparing for another transfer of power after Vice President Harris conceded the election to President-elect Donald Trump.
Courtney Spinelli's in the newsroom with more. Courtney?
Yeah, good morning to you both. We are expecting President Joe Biden to address the nation this morning for the first time since Donald Trump's victory.
The first difficult term they use is transfer of power. For each term, I will have a picture, I will have the official definition, and I will use that term in a sentence. The transfer of power means the process of passing control from one leader to the next. In the United States, for almost 250 years, we've been very lucky. The transfer of power from one president to the next has always been peaceful. Well, almost always. It was a little bumpy during 2020 when Donald Trump passed power to Joe Biden. But for the most part, it's been peaceful. We've never had a president say, nope, I'm not leaving the White House. In fact, I'm going to get the army to help me stay in the White House. The transfer of power has been peaceful. Let's look at a sentence using the transfer of power. The transfer of power will happen after the new president is sworn in. We'll talk more about swearing in just a little bit.
The country is preparing for another transfer of power after Vice President Harris conceded the election to President-elect Donald Trump.
For this next word, I would like to talk about two different ways we use it. Concession, which would be more of the adjective or the noun, and conceded, which is the verb. Let's talk about conceded first. Admitted defeat in an election or contest. Kamala Harris conceded after she saw the election results. That is also a tradition in elections. The person who loses, we say they concede. They admit they lost. It says to all of the people who voted for that person, in this case, Kamala Harris, hey, I know I lost. Now we need to support the winner. We will come together. We will unite as Americans. Kamala Harris conceded after she saw the election results. Every candidate will give a concession speech, which in the news clip, you will see a portion of Kamala Harris's concession speech. A concession speech is a speech given by the person who lost an election, admitting they did not win. In her concession speech, she thanked her supporters. From now until January 20th, 2025, you will hear President-elect quite a bit when talking about President Trump, or should I say President-elect Donald Trump. That means the person who has been elected president but has not started the job yet. In the United States, our election day is always the first Tuesday in November. The day the president is sworn in, again, that's a phrasal verb we will talk about later. On the day the president is sworn in, we call that Inauguration Day, and that will happen on January 20th, 2025. The president-elect will soon begin planning his term. And just in case you don't remember, a presidential term is 4 years. Presidents can be elected twice and only twice, no more than 2 times. In 2028, President Trump will not be able to run. I'm sorry, President-elect Trump. Joe Biden right now is something we call a lame duck president. He's still our president, but we know he will no longer be our president after January. A lame duck president is the opposite of a president-elect.
The country is preparing for another transfer of power after Vice President Harris conceded the election to President-elect Donald Trump.
Courtney Spinelli's in the newsroom with more. Courtney?
Yeah, good morning to you both. We are expecting President Joe Biden to address the nation this morning for the first time since Donald Trump's victory.
Address the nation. We have 2 different words in English, address and address, pronounced slightly differently. You might see an address on an envelope. Address is the verb. Address the nation means to speak to the whole country, usually on TV. The president might address the nation if there is a big war starting. It's usually to alert the entire country of something very important.
The President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
They talked about Joe Biden will be addressing the nation. He is going to congratulate President-elect Donald Trump. He will probably say Kamala Harris ran a great campaign. They just came up a little short. If you come up a little short in English, that means you lost by just a little bit. The president-elect will address the nation about his plans.
Yeah, good morning to you both. We are expecting President Joe Biden to address the nation this morning for the first time since Donald Trump's victory. He says he invited Trump to the White House to begin the transition. Kamala Harris says she is proud of her campaign and thanked her supporters.
I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it.
The vice president addressed the nation Wednesday afternoon, admitting defeat in the presidential election. She delivered her remarks from her alma mater, Howard University, after she spoke with Trump by phone.
President Harris gave her concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University. We will talk about Howard University in just a minute, but let's talk about alma mater now. It comes from the Latin, but in English, we now say it's the school or university someone graduated from. Kamala Harris's alma mater is Howard University. And I had to have the picture, the University of Alabama, because the University of Alabama is my alma mater. I graduated from the University of Alabama way back in 2002. We also use the Latin term alumni to describe people who have graduated from that school. That is the plural, alumni. Alumnus is the singular form. I am an alumnus of the University of Alabama. Howard University. It's a famous university in Washington, D.C., known for being a black university. There was a time in this country where if you were black, it was very difficult to get into a college or a university. Those 2 things are basically the same thing in American English. So there were certain universities or colleges that were set up or built just for students who were black. It was a safe place for them to go, not having to worry about people being mean to them, white people being mean to them. Many well-known people graduated from Howard University. And of course, Kamala Harris is one of them.
I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it.
The vice president addressed the nation Wednesday afternoon, admitting defeat in the presidential election. She delivered her remarks from her alma mater, Howard University, after she spoke with Trump by phone. He gave his victory speech early Wednesday morning in front of an enthusiastic crowd in West Palm Beach.
This is not easy to say. I will say it a couple times slowly. Enthusiastic. enthusiastic. That means showing a lot of excitement and interest. I hope you are enthusiastic towards learning English. I'm sure you are. Her supporters, or Kamala Harris's supporters, were enthusiastic about her campaign.
He gave his victory speech early Wednesday morning in front of an enthusiastic crowd in West Palm Beach.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
The former president faced off with the vice president, who entered the race just over 100 days out from Election Day.
Faced off. It is a phrasal verb meaning competed against each other in an election or contest. She faced off against her opponent in the debate. I thought this might be a new term for you, 100 days out. It's not all that common, but in the news, they use some pretty uncommon terms. You might hear 100 days away. So we are 100 days away from Inauguration Day, but it's a term used to mark 100 days before an important event. They started planning new policies 100 days out from the election.
I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
The former president faced off with the vice president, who entered the race just over 100 days out from Election Day. Harris's decisive defeat devastated hopes that she could revive Democrats' chances following President Joe Biden's bid for re-election, hitting roadblocks.
Revive. Revive. This comes from the Latin. It literally means to give life again. Re means again. Vive has something to do with life. The official definition: to bring back or give new energy to something. Maybe you have stopped studying English for a couple weeks, but then suddenly you get this desire to start learning English again. We may say your interest has been revived. She wanted to revive the economy by creating new jobs. Does the microphone sound a little better? I forgot to turn the microphone on at the beginning of the news lesson. Hopefully it's better now. Hitting roadblocks is an idiom. That means facing obstacles or problems. I know for sure when you first started studying English, you hit a lot of roadblocks. It's not easy. Hopefully now that you have been studying a little longer, you are hitting fewer roadblocks. They were hitting roadblocks trying to pass the new law. And since this is an idiom, there are no real roadblocks in the newscast, but in the picture, you will see what actual roadblocks are. They are things that block a road. Let's look at a sentence talking about studying English and hitting roadblocks. I'm sure you hit roadblocks every day while learning English.
Harris's decisive defeat devastated hopes that she could revive Democrats' chances following President Joe Biden's bid for re-election, hitting roadblocks.
This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
I love what Kamala Harris says, like right in a row. She talks about this is not a time to throw up our hands. It's a time to roll up our sleeves. Let's talk about what both of those idioms mean. To throw up our hands, that means to give up or stop trying. She says for the Democrats, this is not a time to throw up our hands. After many challenges, they almost threw up their hands. I hope you never decide to throw up your hands while learning English. I know it can be frustrating, but hey, nice job. You are already halfway through this English lesson. No. She said it was time to roll up our sleeves. And that means get ready to work hard. Now, the person in the picture is literally rolling up their sleeves. You will find your sleeves on a shirt. That man is wearing a long sleeve shirt, but we also have things called short sleeve shirts. Sometimes you might hear it called a t-shirt, but you can have button-up shirts that are also short sleeved. They rolled up their sleeves to tackle the new challenges.
This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
Harris encouraged her supporters to accept the results of the election, calling it a critical part of democracy.
Critical. This is something that is very important or necessary. That person is in a hospital bed and they could be in critical condition. You will sometimes hear that term used when talking about medical things. They are in critical condition. The next decision is critical for the future of the country. I'd like to think in the United States, I live in a democracy. At least I hope I do. It feels like I do. Most people thought that President Trump would not win, but the people voted for him, or at least over 50% of the people voted for him. I know our current president, Joe Biden, did not want that to happen. He wanted Kamala Harris. So maybe we do live in a democracy. That is a system of government where people choose their leaders. I know that many of you, because you have told me in the comments, you do not feel like you live in a democracy. You cannot have an election and elect the leaders you want. I'm pretty sure in Russia, they don't have a democracy. It seems like President Putin has been there for a very long time. But I know for sure, North Korea, I'm sure nobody is watching from the country of North Korea, unfortunately, but they definitely do not live in a democracy. We would call that a dictatorship. A dictatorship is where the country is run by one person. In a democracy, citizens vote for their leaders.
This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
Harris encouraged her supporters to accept the results of the election, calling it a critical part of democracy.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
Now, you might know fueled as something you put in a car to make it go. Gas, gasoline. It's another name for gas, fuel. But here in the newscast, they use it as a verb. That means supported or gave energy to something. Take a look at that woman in the picture. It looks like the coffee is fueling her. It looks like she has a lot of energy. A strong cup of coffee can fuel my entire day. I'm not sure why you are learning English. If you would like, put the reason you are learning English in the comments. But here is an example sentence using fueled and English learning. The hope of a better job fueled her desire to learn English. You could also fuel a fire. To fuel the fire, he added some dry wood to it.
Harris encouraged her supporters to accept the results of the election, calling it a critical part of democracy.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
The 75-day transition period now begins, where the president-elect will build out his team before Inauguration Day. One of the things he'll need to do is fill thousands of government positions with political appointees.
I mentioned Inauguration Day earlier. Let's talk about the official definition. This is the day when the new president officially starts their job. You can see in the picture, President Trump puts his left hand on the Bible. The president doesn't have to do that. They can pick another holy book like the Quran or the Torah, or they don't have to pick a holy book at all. But they raise their right hand and say stuff like, I promise to be a good president for the American people. Inauguration Day is an important event in the US. Right now, President-elect Trump is trying to pick his political appointees. Those are people chosen for specific government positions by the president. I guess there are thousands and thousands of appointees the president needs to pick. I guess the number is somewhere around 4,000. Some of these people he can pick just because he wants them, but others he will need the Senate to confirm them. In other words, he will pick them, but then the Senate needs to say, yep, they are a good choice for that position. The president's appointees help make important decisions. Some of the most important people to the president we call the cabinet. I will probably do an entire English lesson a little later about what the presidential cabinet is. I found this picture. We should probably talk about it. In the picture, you can see on the right someone who looks like a judge. In the middle is former President Bill Clinton, and all the way to the left is his wife, Hillary Clinton. She served as our Secretary of State under Barack Obama, and it looks like she is being sworn in as Secretary of State. She was also a senator from the state of New York, so this could be when she is being sworn in as senator. A senator is not a political appointee. They are elected by the people.
The 75-day transition period now begins, where the president-elect will build out his team before Inauguration Day. One of the things he'll need to do is fill thousands of government positions with political appointees. In the meantime, the Trump campaign shared its statement following the phone call between the two opponents. It reads in part, quote, President Trump acknowledged Vice President Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign.
Acknowledged. It is a verb, and it means accepted or recognized something as true. Kamala Harris had to acknowledge that she did not win the election. Something President Trump did not do in 2020. He never admitted he lost the election. He never conceded the election. She acknowledged the challenges of her job. Kamala Harris acknowledged that President-elect Trump would be the new president. That's very important for the losing candidate to do. Have you ever heard of something we call January 6th? In the United States? It happened in 2021. Our Capitol building was attacked by people who supported the former President Trump. Yeah, it was not a good day in American history. Some say our democracy was challenged that day. Tenacity and tenacious. Tenacious is the adjective form, but in the news clip, they use tenacity. That means determination to keep going even when it's hard. To learn English, you need to be tenacious. You need to have tenacity. It's really hard to learn English. It's not going to be easy. Her tenacity helped her through a difficult campaign.
In the meantime, the Trump campaign shared its statement following the phone call between the two opponents. It reads in part, quote, President Trump acknowledged Vice President Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign, and both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country.
We call ourselves the United States of America, like we come together and act as one country, even though we are 50 different unique states. I wouldn't say our country is united right now. I would say this country is divided. That is the opposite of united. Unify is the verb form of united, bringing people together as one. Her speech was unifying, aiming to bring people together. She said, I know I concede that I lost, but this is a time for all Americans. It doesn't matter who they voted for, to come together and act as one country. Congratulations, you made it to the end of another English lesson. Before you go, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you are looking for more English lessons, right down there is an English lesson I did about President Trump winning the election. I'm sorry, President-elect Trump. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.